Montauk Air Force Station. By the way, if you have not read the book by now, it is recommended you do so that the commentary on this video will be more meaningful to you. Now, first, before we go out to Montauk, I'm going to take you on a tour of this installation and show you the two receivers as featured in the Montauk book and also the Delta T antenna here at Space-Time Laboratories. We now will go and show you the installation here and then out to Montauk. This is the receiver room at Preston's Space-Time Laboratories. This is where we can monitor the world from, in this room full of radio receivers. You can see speakers on the ceiling. Over here we have the audio control, audio amplifiers, patch racks. We can patch the audio and the RF from here. This board right here, this is the Delta T antenna terminal interface. Now this is MKULTRA-24 radio receiver as acquired from Dr. von Neumann upstate. This rack is one receiver. Here we have the label on the FR-24 receiver. This is the RCA receiver setup that was used at Montauk.
In Jesus' name, and Lord, comfort this dad. Give her wisdom, Lord, to know how to deal with this son. Father, also we want
You'll recognize this from the picture in the center of the book of the Montauk chair room. These receivers were used on the Montauk chair.
For her and also for her family. Lord, I just pray in Jesus' name that, Lord, even as you read the desires of their heart, that you would minister to them. Thank you, sir.
Lord, I'm just asking in Jesus' name that you would stretch forth your hand, touching that hospital center home, Lord. May this child be born on schedule in perfect health. Then here's another mother that called in, and she's got two daughters. Both of them are very sick tonight with a cough. This phone has really been something this winter, understand. It's really been amazing. My God, every person out there that has a food, just get up near your radio right now. Put your hand on your ears and ask for faith. That won't heal you, but it'll show God you're trusting. Lord Jesus.
That signal you're hearing coming over the speaker is from this receiver.
And let them go free tonight. Everybody out there, Lord, that has the flu that's looking to you right now.
See the three receivers sharing the signal from the antenna.
Here's one of our dear sisters from
the VU meter running with the signal.
Her son was flying today to pick up
What's interesting to consider here is that these antennas are only separated about 10 feet apart.
In Jesus' name, I do pray that you would be with him, Lord, on this mission.
Lord, pray, Lord, in the Lord right ministry. And just say my name as often as you can before the Lord. And I know Brother Stan, he'd like you to just keep lifting him up. We had a grandmother that was a prayer warrior. I mean, and she prayed and prayed.
You can see two now sharing.
And I tell you, we need all the prayers we can get.
Here's the middle one,
God,
and the end one sharing.
Glory.
Thank God for the thousands of prayer partners around the world all the time.
Preston Space-Time Laboratories showing the Delta T antenna setup. This is a small replication of what was done at Montauk. The whole antenna structure here. This is the Delta T antenna. You see the amount of wire coming off this antenna. More oblique angle to the antenna. You can see it's shaped like two pyramids, one on top of each other. Now we're out at the Montauk Air Force Base. We're now heading into the Air Force Base using the back entrance. We're walking in with the Japanese production group at this point. That is Peter Belts ahead of us. He is the producer of the Japanese TV special. We're walking in the back way. This park is closed, although here you can walk in the back entrance. This is the fence where the park is closed. Now you'll see a shot of the radar antenna on the radar tower. This is what transmitted most of the Montauk information. Now we're inside the fence. This is the area is closed. If you go in here, you run risk of getting a fine of $50. Be careful if you go in. The signs say this area of the park is officially closed. Do not enter, no trespassing. You can see the pink radar tower. Now we're looking at the sign that says U.S. Air Force Station, Montauk. This is proof that there was an Air Force present here at Montauk. Now we're seeing the outside of the boys' bunker. Now we're walking into the west entrance of the boys' bunker. We're now inside the boys' bunker, walking from the south side to the north side in the long corridor. There are many rooms off to our left on this long corridor. On my right is Duncan Cameron at this point, and on my left is Alfred Bielik holding the Coleman lanterns we're using to light the inside of the bunker. You can see the doors on our left. These are huge blast-proof doors. This is the bunker where the Montauk Boys project was done. This is where the boys were actually stripped of their mind, and the mind was reformed through computers and reinserted in the body of the boy. The interesting thing to note here is this bunker had to be air conditioned, although it is essentially underground. It is about 55 degrees at all times. What this means is they had a large number of bodies in here creating heat. This tells us 100% that they had the heat source in this room here, in this group of rooms. Now, there was only a few people in here, as the military would normally have. Why do they need the air conditioning in summer? We can understand heat in the winter because you want to be warmer than 55. But in summer, this area still would be somewhat cold. So this suggests there was a heat source, which could be the number of bodies. Now we have the cage that the Montauk boys were held in. Now Al is inside the cage and Duncan is next to me on my right. I'm walking down a small corridor between my left side on the cage and my right side. This corridor is only about roughly 6 foot wide. You can see the doors to the end of this long corridor. We're now inside the cage. You'll see the tables where the Montauk boys were held. They were held on these tables. They were somewhat out. They were not conscious. They were processed here. Most of the time they were stark naked. They were also held on these shelves over here to our right. We're now going in one of these little rooms. There are many of these little rooms. I believe there are 3 of the rooms this size. We're not going to show you all the rooms. We're just going to show you representative rooms of each particular type of room. Now we're going into the medium-sized room. The interesting thing to note here, there's no smell of fire or rot or anything. Some sort of an explosion or something happened here. Duncan read that there was an energy explosion in here. Now we're seeing the Montauk spider. This is one of Duncan's little pets. He was the one who requested this to be photographed. Now we're in one of the large rooms. There are approximately 3 of these large rooms. These rooms held the chairs that the boys were programmed in. They also had many desks in them. This was essentially the heart of the programming. This is now an armory room. We show this because there still is some piece of machinery in there. That was Helga Morrow, world-renowned psychic. They partitioned this room off. This is the air conditioning.
Screaming.
Can you say it a little louder?
Screaming.
You feel screaming.
I feel sadness, helplessness, a feeling of no return.
That's right.
This is world-renowned psychic by what she's picking up. You okay, Helga?
This bothers me.
This lovely lady is very emotionally affected by this. You can see it by the look on her face.
Getting older now, too.
You want to look at us, Helga?
I feel like I smell urine and
Crap. Everything.
defecation, and I feel pain. I feel like a state of helplessness, like there's no return. It's very emotional for me because I feel that those that have given their lives,
This is the
I'd like to
program
know
that
why.
Stu
Why
says he
they
has no
gave
part
their
of.
life? You know, why did they give their life? What was the reason
Yeah.
for this madness?
What madness, what they've been caught up in.
What is this? People talk about the Nazis
This is worse.
and Mengele. My father told me that the Americans are
You
far
okay,
more
Duncan?
vicious than that. I feel like whatever we're doing here, it's for a good reason. I know that God puts us in the right place at the right time. And I just pray for the souls that were here.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You feeling better, Duncan?
Take one more charge.
Look at your...
Pipes? The other man speaking in the background was Al Bielek. We're now seeing the pipes, the refrigeration pipes, that come up from the room, go down in either end of the bunker, north and south, underground. We're now walking towards the machinery area. There used to be very large generators in here. This is the room that had the generators in it. There are those 3 tanks that are always in the government generator installations. There are many small rooms filled with machinery here in these installations. A lot of the machinery is gone at this point, but it's still interesting to look at these rooms. You can see ventilation systems for the entire bunker. You'll see heating facilities. This is an old-style power control rack. Here you'll see another ventilator for the generators. This control rack probably dates back to the teens when these bunkers were built. These bunkers were built as an artillery fort. These control guns like the size of the guns in Navarone. We're seeing minor rooms that had pumps in them, air conditioning, heating equipment in them. Now seeing leaves on the floor. We're seeing the heater. We're now in the power control area. This is wiring from the teens and the 20s, as well as transformers later on, like from the 50s. These are very old transformers here. Now you see the gray ones are newer transformers. Another ventilator. You can see another shot of the transformers. We're now outside. We're going out the entrance we came in. You can see it's an unassuming looking area. It looks like very nice woodlands. But what a horror this thing hides. You can see the radar antenna in the background. Now we're inside the 5-sided room that the Montauk boys have described to me. 3 of them in unison, each one individually described this room. One of them drew me a picture of this room. This is where they line the boys up for indoctrination. Now we're seeing a very old air conditioning compressor, like in an old ice house. This system probably carried ammonia. We can see lockers for the workmen here. Now we're going to go into that building. Now we're in the fire station. I'm told there was 2 fire engines in here. You see still some fire department equipment. This is where an underground entrance used to be. Friends of ours got into the underground entrance and then they tore it out about 6 months later. They poured cement down and then put dirt over it. This is now another one of those white buildings. This, we believe, was used as a storage building. I don't remember any other use for this myself. Now we're walking down the road east of the boys' bunker. You can see gas station. Does anyone need gas? We've heard that there still are gas in these gas pumps. You'll see a fire extinguisher sitting out in the field. These things are reusable. They can be recharged. How come nobody has taken the fire extinguisher? Now we're at the bottom of the hill looking at the old radar site. We see the pink radar tower. We see the FPS-35 radar tower and UFO landing pads or FPS-6 radar towers. Now we're walking up Radar Hill. We see the greenish building on our right. That is the Management and Financial Control Building for the Montauk project. We can also see the computer center. That's that big cement structure with a vent on the side of it. That's on our right as we're walking up behind the management building. You can see the bottom of the pink radar tower, the FPS-16 radar tower. See more people from the Japanese TV crew. Now we're inside the management center. Imagine 100 or so typewriters just typing away in here. That's why they had sound-absorbing materials on some of the walls. This is where requisitions were filled. This was where requisitions would be filled out and ordered materials. Material orders would go out from this building. Whenever I wanted to requisition a part, I had to come here and requisition the part. We can see the big radar antenna. You can see some of the sound absorbing material in this room, in this building. This is looking in where I went in to order many pieces of electronic equipment to be brought out to the station for use on the project. This room was filled with secretaries, accountants, lieutenants processing material orders here. The quartermaster was here. There's Helger and Al. You can see the sound absorbing. This was the financial manager's office, we believe. We're now looking out the east door, right across the street from the pink radar tower. This is the most awful pink you ever want to see. There used to be a big radome on top of it. Now we're inside the quartermaster's area, behind that counter we were before seeing. Another shot of the antenna site. We're looking out the door towards the computer center. We're now walking up the hill towards the radar tower. We're behind the computer center right now. This is the radar tower with the big radar antenna on it. Here's the computer center. This is the room that housed the very large computers. There was a number of IBM 360 systems in here and 370 systems. You can see the floors that carry the electrical wiring. You can see more electrical wiring. Now we're inside what we called the console area. This is where all the control consoles were set up for the different computers that we use here. They were Cray 1s and IBM 360s, and Cray 2s and IBM 370s later on. Here's one of the leftover FPS-35 radar consoles. This thing still sits here because nobody wants it and nobody wanted to move it. This thing weighs probably a half a ton to a ton. And it sat there dead, doing nothing for as long as I can remember. Of course, I wasn't here when the SAGE radar was active. Again, you can see more wiring troughs that carried wires for the computers. Now we're inside the office of the computer manager. This, we believe, was a colonel or a lieutenant colonel. He managed the whole computer operation. We're looking out his window. He had a commanding view of the computer operations room. Now we're inside the computer management room. This was all the sundry managers. These rooms had desks in them with IBM PCs on them and this sort of thing where people did their computerese type thing. You can see it was a nice room with very nice mahogany paneling. They tried to make this nice for the workers. This was the room that the time standards were held in. This is the time standard management room. This is like a little room off the main room. There's Al, there's Duncan being himself. In this small room was the satellite receiving systems for the time and frequency references. This is what tied Montauk into the rest of the world as far as timing and frequency management. Now we're in the cooling control area. This is where all the big air conditioning was. Remember, when this was built, this was a early solid-state vacuum tube computer system that made lots of heat. So they had huge air conditioning systems here in this building. These air conditioning systems, when the later solid-state computers were in, could make this place into a walk-in refrigerator. Hi, Al. This was like 20 and 30-ton air conditioning systems. Also, there was a lot of power control panels in this room. Big ventilators. Now we're in the phone management area. This was the switching room for the Air Force part of Fort Hero. You see a nice brand new cable that comes up into this room and just ends. This was not here in '86. This was put in somewhere between '86 and 1990. I'm not sure when myself. You can see there's hundreds of circuits here. Why they put in this new cable for a derelict, deserted military base that was a state park in '86. Here are test prods. Why are they still sitting here? We're looking down one of the long corridors now. This is the terminal for the FPS-35 radar. This is what drove signals to the main transmitter. The transmitter was in the building just south of this building. You can see this is a typical 50s type technology. Lots of vacuum tubes, lots of very large power supplies. We'll see more of this kind of stuff later when we go in the transmitter building. There was an office in this room here. I don't quite remember whose office it was. It was a minor manager's office. We're now in one of those many little rooms that are out at Montauk. Smile, Alger. Duncan is about to have a connection. Duncan is having a connection. That's Duncan being himself. Now we're in the main ventilation. The only thing is, this ventilation goes underground as well as above ground. This connects to that large ventilation tower on the southeast side of the building. That's the south corner towards the lighthouse, towards the road we walked up. These are very, very large ventilators. These ventilators drove air underground, we believe. The other ventilators we saw in the south end of the building drove air into the building. This is a curious slab that's placed on the south side of the building towards the ocean. This reminds me of the 2001 monolith. I'm told this is to prevent a blast from getting into the computer building. We're now back on the road, walking up towards the radar tower. We can see the power station south of the radar tower. That's ahead of us. That's the thing that looks like a garage. We're now looking up at the antenna. We're now inside the radar tower on the first floor. This is the power control panels for the radar tower. This is like your fuse box in your house, except this fuse box is bigger than some of the walls in the average house. A cooling tank of coolant for the amplitrons. We see a sundry of small switch boxes on the wall that we're heading towards. We're now looking at the switch panel again, the circuit breaker box for this house. It's one of the biggest ones I've seen. Going around the end, we're going to go behind this. We're going to show you where Preston pulled the wiring out of the power panel in order to shut the transmitter down upstairs. Now we're up on the second floor. This was office area. I also had my lab up here. You can see kids are dumped over a desk. This is where my lab was. I had a ring of benches in there, lots of test equipment. This is where I did R&D work. We're now going into the office area. This is where the General Secretary was. Another shot of the General Secretary's office. This office here is my office. I had a desk in here and a couple of file cabinets. This is where I design a lot of material here at the base. You see, one day I had to go to the John real bad and made a breakthrough for it. I did finally get relief that day, though. Now, this next office is the secretary for the alien. Across the way was the alien's office, a reptilian. Now we're in a console area. There was loads and loads of schematics here. Somebody made a bonfire of the schematics. Now we're in a storage room in a large ventilator for this floor. Now we're upstairs in the third floor. This is the first transmitter room. You can see the test equipment for the old transmitter. Now we're looking at the low-level driver. This produced pulses of a couple of kilowatts from some 100-watt CW tubes in these cabinets. This was what was called a stay-low function, a very complex pulsar and oscillator. We're now looking at some of the actual equipment itself. You can see this is technology from the 50s. There's no question about it. There were many, many cabinets. Down in there is where stable oscillators using variable vacuum capacitors, motor-driven, motor-tuned, that were phase-locked, frequency-locked to references that came onto the site. More power supplies. There were tons and tons of power supplies here. This is part of the synthesizer chain that generated the 425 to 450 megahertz. Now we go across the way. We'll see power. More large power supplies. These cabinets held the 3CX100 stages. You can see the air conditioning above it. They had to blow chilled air into these racks to keep them cool. These two racks, the one just before and this one, had the power stages in it that drove the kilowatt stage, that drove the 100 kilowatt stage in the first tetrode control room, which we'll see in a few minutes. This is what's left of the receiver. We can see this rack is derelict. It's been torn apart. You can see, if you look closely, there's a lot of rust on it, a lot of corrosion on it. Now we're looking at the screen rooms. The one to our left held the Amplitron. This one here held the tetrode driver. It was a 100 kilowatt power stage that drove the multi-megawatt pulse power amplifier in this room here. You can see the RF filtering. Now we're inside the Amplitron room. You see these huge cabinets. Here is an Amplitron. This is with the upper magnet off, showing the blue top of the tube. This is a tube that's 6 foot long. You can see what pulled it out of its socket. You can imagine a socket this big. This is the power control. Very large motor-driven variacs that only change the voltage by about 20%. You can see many different breakers, power line filters, big contactors. This is what they turn the thing on and off with. They didn't use big knife switches in these days. Here you can see where the rectifiers were, the main rectifiers. This monstrosity is the power transformer. I'd like to run your transistor radio on that. This is where more rectifiers were. There are filter capacitors up in here. Down in there is a huge inductor or a choke. You see a chassis hanging on for dear life. This is the pulse modulator, the low-level part of the pulse modulator. Here they had the pulse damping diodes. This monster down below is the charging reactor in the pulse forming network. You can see part of the pulse forming network, that big copper-colored coil. Over to our left, you can see a very large step-down transformer. This is what sent the pulse downstairs to the underground for the Delta T antenna. This transformer right here. You can see it says Sperry on it, an FPS 35. This was the auxiliary pulse drive transformer. You can see more pulse forming network. The big studs held the very large capacitors. This is where the thyrotrons were. There were 4 of them in parallel that fired off the big pulse coil in the base of the Amplitron assembly. More pulse-forming network material. Each transmitter had 25 pulse-forming capacitors in it, tapped on that big copper coil. Now we're in the IPA Tetro driver room. The government took this with them. But this is the same size as the other room. You can see how much equipment was in the other room. We're seeing another shot of the low-level driver area. This we saw downstairs. We're now up on the 4th floor of the radar tower. There were 2 redundant transmitters in this building. Here we're seeing the very large control panel. There was one of these on each floor. They control each transmitter from its own control panel. This is the overall control panel. As you can see, lots of switches to throw. You had to be an engineer, literally, to run this thing. Here we see where Preston cut apart the main power distribution for the transmitter. This was when Junior was out and we were trying to shut the transmitter down. These were just regular power boxes. Why would anybody want them? There's tons of power boxes on this base. This is up on the 4th floor. And you can see the torch marks on the wall. We're inside the tetrode room, the 100 kilowatt driver upstairs. Here's the high pot tester that we use to test the amplitrons for high voltage breakdown. That thing put out 100, 200 kilovolts. Now we're looking inside the upper amplitron room with the upper magnet on it. Interesting thing will happen. The picture all of a sudden fades out. Something jammed the camera here. Now we're looking at a closer shot of the upper amplitron with its magnet on. You can see torch marks. Now they're becoming more visible, the torch marks. This is where Preston cut the waveguides out to actually stop this transmitter from transmitting. Just imagine the power that went through this room. This is the AIL computer. This processed the thought forms. This is a modified IFF computer. I remember performing massive modifications. We can see a label here, Power Supply Subassembly MX3116 GLA Airborne Instruments Laboratory, a division of Cutler Hammer Inc. US. This was made in about the 60s. This was put in the SAGE radar to jam-proof it, and also for IFF, that's identification friend or foe. We just saw the canister where the big crystal plates were held. This computer is huge. We're looking at the back end of it now. This was a vacuum tube computer. This made lots and lots of heat. This is one of the chassis that sits on the floor from the AIO computer. Somebody pulled these chassis out. For what, we don't know. We're now seeing new wiring that goes up to the roof. Some of this wiring has dates of like 89 on it. This wire we're looking at here is dated 1988. It has a nick in it to make it look used. The nick is just deep enough so it doesn't hurt the function of the wiring, but it looks old. They would do this to camouflage it so nobody would notice it. But if you look at the date, you know how to read the date codes. You realize it's new wiring. We're now on the 5th floor in the antenna control room. We see the bottom of the antenna sticking out with its huge waveguide and rotary joint. These cabinets house the control for the motors upstairs, those gray cabinets. We now see the upper antenna assembly sticking through the lower part of the roof. The antenna is just above our heads now. Now we're outside, up on the roof. We now will just pan around the base for you. Remember, this is an Air Force station. Everybody calls it the Montauk Air Force Base. So here we see the buildings around the planetary grid cross point. These buildings are arranged in a pattern to tune the grid. We see the secondary grid point in that triangle down towards the bottom of the screen. We see one of the UFO landing pads. You can see this Air Force station is huge. There's a lot of property here. Today, this is a state park. This roof is very, very dangerous to be up on. You don't want to walk close to the edge of it because the fence is away in sections. Here is a shot of the lighthouse from the roof of the radar tower. Here we have a fence and a railing. As you can see, the fence disappears, and that first step is a doozy. You don't want to take that first step. It's like over 100 feet up. We're taking another walk around. You can see Junior on one of the bunkers. Junior is still here, folks. Another shot of the UFO landing pad. That's the top of an FPS-6 radar tower. Another shot of the planetary grid cross point. And there's a triangular cross point. We call that Maria's cross point because Maria Fix found it and identified it as a cross point. Duncan Cameron verified it. And Al Bielek also verified it. There's another UFO landing pad. We're now going to go for a shot of the fire station. There used to be a little round blue building to the right of the fire station. It's now gone. That was an underground entrance we showed earlier in this film. Hi, Al. That's the communications building over there. Here's another shot of the communications building. Watch that first step. It's a doozy. It is not recommended you go up on the roof of this building, even if you can. It's windy and it's very dangerous up here. And the state park people get very upset if they see anyone up here, rightfully so. You can get hurt. And the state park people have our interests at heart. That's why the area is officially closed. This is a dangerous area. So now you can see we're coming up to the bunkers. These bunkers are south. You can see a black form on the bunker. That we believe is Junior. See the black form right there. Now we're looking at the antennas. This is the antenna from the roof. You can see the motors are gone. They had 4 huge motors driving this thing. This thing would rotate. They had a small motor to change its azimuth. There's the gain horn, as big as a Volkswagen Rabbit. We can get an idea of the immense size of this antenna by just looking at the front of this thing from the corner of the roof. We can see the camera's getting the heebie-jeebies again. Now we're looking at the wire that goes up the back of the antenna. We can see the omnidirectional array. I'm positioning for a better shot. This stick is about 20 feet tall, but it looks very small in comparison to this large antenna. Now we're outside again. Now we're in the power station. This is a 10 megawatt power plant. Over 2.5 megawatts per generator. There's 4 of them here. They typically ran it at 5 megawatts, but they could get 10 out of it. They had to. There's those 3 tanks again. You understand, they pressurize these tanks with air and pump it into a few of the cylinders to start the engine up without a load, of course. Then once it gets running, then they put all cylinders online. Then they put the generator online. They had 2 of these running constantly. One ready to be turned on and one being serviced. As one would break down, they turn on the backup one. And then by then, the serviced one would be serviced, and they'd be servicing the one that broke down. And they kept rotating these things as they broke down. You could run most of Long Island off of this power station if you had to. You can see this thing is massive. The military did things on a massive scale here to do this. This is for the SAGE radar, which is part of the early warning radar shield of the 50s. This system was deactivated when the satellites went up in the late 60s, early 70s. Then the Montauk group picked up this old installation to use for their experimentation. Here we have the main power console. This is where they controlled the 4 generators from. Nothing skimpy here. The government didn't skimp on a thing here. Who knows, maybe a coat of paint, a little repair, it'll be working again. This is the power control panels for the entire base. We can see the relation to the generators of the power control panels. We can see dates on this, going up to July of '79. This base was supposedly derelict in '71. Why were they testing stuff on a derelict base? The large batteries used as backup power. We're now looking out some of the windows that look north towards the radar tower. This is west behind the radar tower. Another shot of the batteries, the backup batteries. We're now going into the pink building. This is where Duncan Cameron was interviewed for the TV special. We're looking out the south window of the pink building. Now we can see Duncan being filmed. That is Toni Hudson, wife of the actor Dirk Benedict. She's an actor herself. She's the spokesperson for the Japanese television special. Here we can see Duncan being filmed.
So did it stop? This month it came. Was it over?
That's Peter Moon. There's Al Bielek. Now we're outside. We're outside behind the radar tower right now, looking at one of the UFO landing pads. We're looking at some of the old piping that runs around the base that carried hot water. This is behind the old radar tower. There's the Japanese camera people walking around like they're lost. They don't know where they're going. It's easy to get lost on this base. We're now going to go inside after we pan the area, one of the FPS-6 radar towers. We're now inside the UFO landing pad or FPS-6 radar tower. We're now going to look out through its broken windows. This gives us a different vantage point on the old Montauk base. We can see one of the bunkers that's meant to look like a house. Another tower There's the main tower. There's the substation north of the tower. We can see more of the piping. This piping carried hot water from the power station all over the base. If you look carefully, you can still see the etheric image of Junior. You don't see this from the window with the naked eye, that black spot you just saw. You can see the area is still picturesque. We're now looking west. Again, you can see a picture of Junior at that last shot. Now we're looking out the door. Now we're out behind, west of the computer center, looking at the wire runs. This is where they ran all the wiring in. Hi, Al. Hi, Helga. This is the white bunker that's made to look like a house in the 20s. They used to camouflage the bunkers that housed the artillery. Now we're going into the power control bunker. This is the room you saw when you walked in. This was like an office area. This is where they managed the power for the bunkers on the base. You can see modern control panels. You can see these slits that they used to observe through before they put these other buildings up. Now you see old 20s and teens switching and wiring, along with a modern switch. Old transformers, 1920s style wiring again. This ladder goes up to a third level. There's nothing but a pot-bellied stove up there, we're told. Now we're downstairs. You can see the wiring coming in through its wiring troughs. Now you can see what's called hands of wiring on the east wall. These things date back to almost the turn of the century. This is original wiring for the artillery bunkers, for the artillery fort. This is very old. This actually today would be considered antique electrical wiring, the electrical apparatus. Of course, compared to the radar, this is low power, relatively low power. We're outside again. We're now headed towards the shop building. We're behind the shop building, just panning around the area. Another picturesque view. Another site, another perspective of the base. We're looking in the door of the shop building. Now we're going to go inside the shop building. First we have the shop office that we're walking in right now. We now have a shot of the crawl space, the entrance to the crawl space, right here. In this room is a plug for the underground entrance. We believe this used to be an entrance to the underground that they plugged up after '83 when they shut the project down. We've looked at it and it appears to go down in the ground. We've dug down like a couple of feet and it still goes down. If you put your ear up against it, you'll hear machinery running from the underground. This is the room where the lathes, drill presses, milling machines, and that sort of thing was. We even see a sign that says eye protection required. This is the main machine shop right here. This room used to hum with machines making metal pieces. This is one of the offices again. This was the inspection area for the machine shop. Of because you can see there's been a lot of vandalism. Now we're outside, west of the machine shop, looking down Radar Hill towards the town. Big water tanks. You can see a manhole going to the water tanks. Now we're going into one of the waterworks buildings. This is a water purification. This is where they put chlorine in the water. More water pumps. Now we're walking down the hill from the radar tower area. This is the fire control water area. There's an old Tesla turbine in this building. This dates back to the 30s, we believe. This area was built up slowly from the teens up to the 30s. Although there's buildings that go back before the 1900s, but most of them have been torn down here. More wiring panels. A bathroom. We could make a tape of Montauk bathrooms. They had hundreds of bathrooms. This is where they kept another fire engine. This is where they kept a pumper that they filled with water. There is the Tesla turbine, built to Tesla's original specs, driven by an engine, a gasoline engine. You see the spark plugs on it. Now we're outside. We're walking down from the hill now. Now we're down on one of the main roads. We're looking at the secondary cross point right here.
Yeah, look, I'm not asking to do this. There is right here is something very, very powerful right in front of me. Look, I'm not making this happen. It's going crazy. Oh my God, I can feel it pulling. The electric, it's like electricity. It's pulling like crazy. Watch it.
This right here.
That was Helga doing a read in the secondary cross point. Now we're going inside the first building. This is a very interesting building because of what's upstairs. Here we see rooms that look like a house. But wait until we get upstairs. Something very strange upstairs. Here we're upstairs. Look at the decor in this room. This is a wild decor. This is early mind control in these rooms. This is the black and white room. I've seen pictures of a room just like this in the Timothy Leary report, that Mr. Leary used a room like this to enhance LSD experiments. Interesting. What is a room like this doing on a military base? This is not done by kids. It's too neat. This says they had chemical mind control out here at some point. Of course, it's not much of a stretch of the imagination to go to electromagnetic mind control from chemical mind control. These rooms probably go back to the 60s. So 10 years later, in the 70s, they were doing electromagnetic mind control. Isn't that interesting, folks? This is the Tiger Stripe room. You go in this room, this is the tie-dye room. We first thought this was kids, but you look, you notice it doesn't go up on the ceiling, there's no drips of paint on the floor. Kids didn't do this, an artist did this. You see there's a pattern that goes through this room. It's well known that color schemes can enhance mind activity. Color schemes can enhance the influencing of minds and brainwashing and this sort of thing. This is what we believe they did in these rooms. But this was like the 50s and the 60s possibly. This is preceding the Montauk project. So you see, the base has a history of mind control, starting probably at least the early 60s when Dr. Leary did his work. We're back in the Tiger Stripe room. We're now going to look outside so you can see this is on the Montauk base. It's all very recognizable. There's the waterworks buildings. There's the cross point. We're now outside again. We're just going to wander around, show you these houses one by one. I'll be commenting when it's necessary. This, we believe, was the base commander's house. We're not sure, but this definitely was a living quarter. This is right next to the administration building. They had these beautiful paneled rooms downstairs in almost all these house-like facilities. There's a shot of the radar tower. Now we're inside the command center. This is the administration area used up until about 1981. Bulletin board. Here is the mail area. This is the base post office. They had mailboxes here. We're now going into the administrative office. This is Commander Pruitt's office right here. We're outside again. This red building is the Technical Operations Center. We're now going inside the Technical Operations Center. Another one of those paneled rooms. They need Duncan with his hammer to put that paneling back up. This is upstairs. The interesting thing about this office here, this was the office, as I remember, of Fred Cuppers, known as Cupp, who is the father of Helga Morrow. Helga picked up the vibes of her father in this room. We're now downstairs looking at a 1981 calendar they left behind. We're outside again. Now we're going inside this little yellow building. According to Duncan Cameron and backed up by Al Bielek, this is the building that the aliens were in. I can also smell a horrible smell myself inside this building, almost like feces and urine. We're outside again. This is the recreation center here. We're now inside the recreation center in the briefing room. Interesting thing to note that this had permanent seats like the theater would have in the briefing room. Now we're inside the theater. There's no permanent seats inside this theater area. This backs up memories of the Montauk boys standing stark naked, lined up, being indoctrinated with who knows what kind of films. For that operation, they could not have seats permanently in the theater. This, we believe, is a pool hall in a game room. We can see they were quite impressed with Snoopy. There's the commissary. We're now inside the commissary. This is filled with leftovers from a food service company, an airline food company. This is the company that supplied food to the concession at the lighthouse in the Montauk Vista restaurant on the Montauk Downs State Park, which is also a golf course. We thought this may have meant something, but this doesn't really mean anything, since probably the person that runs the two concessions just dumped this stuff here to store it, and then it got broken into by the kids in the area. We're inside the gymnasium here. They played many sports games here. This is the grid cross point, or the traffic circle that surrounds the planetary grid cross point here. We're now standing in the center of the grid cross point. We're just going to scan around the place, show you the buildings. Then we'll go into them one at a time. Come on, Duncan, hurry up. There's the barracks. We'll now go into the buildings one by one. We're now going in this first house, which I believe was used as an office facility. Another one of those paneled rooms in the lower section. These houses were pretty much the same. They had a very elaborate shower and bathroom facilities. outside again. Now we're going into the bowling alley. This was posh at one time. Walking down the lanes now. We'll now see old AMF pin spotters. Automatic pin spotters. They had a double bowling alley here. We're looking back towards where the people rolled the balls. We're now in the kitchen building. This is where they did the microwave oven experiments. They used the shielding of this meat locker as a makeshift screen room so they wouldn't bake the people in the microwave beam from the big antenna. Now we see the barracks. We're going to go inside the barracks now. This is the general kitchen area used in the barracks. This is also a living room. We're now looking in the rooms. We can see it's all carpeted. This was actually a plush barracks. There was 1 or 2 beds in each room. The officers had a single bedroom. The lower people had a double bedroom. Of course, when I stayed here, I stayed in one of the double bedrooms. We're now going upstairs. More rooms upstairs. Reminds me of a very plush convent. Long corridors with lots of small rooms. We're now going downstairs. We're going to be leaving the barracks now. We're now outside looking at the cross point again. These are the 2 houses that are on the south road coming off the cross point. I don't remember what they used these houses for. I don't ever remember being in them personally. They're like a lot of the other houses on the base. We're now walking down the south road towards this very curious white building that is to this day maintained. This is a park maintenance building, we're told. This, we believe, is the building that houses the underground entrance. There's probably security facilities in here. This antenna probably ties the underground, the Montauk Underground. It still is in use today to the rest of the world. We can see there are some wires going to the antenna at this point. There's no TV on top of that tower. It looks like VHF antennas. This is the old AT&T telephone switching center for the base. But now it's used by the State of New York Parks Commission. Keep off the dunes. Interesting thing to note here is the power is on and all these windows are blocked out. You can't see in. What are they hiding here? It's very curious, isn't it? Of course, a high security facility, they wouldn't want anybody seeing in. We're now taking the circle road around. This will eventually curve around back to the north again. You can see the radar antenna. Just to our right is the bunker that Junior was sighted on. Now we're inside this building. This, we think, may have been some sort of a medical facility. Here is a curious radiation symbol on one of the doors. They did something radioactive in here. This also could be for an X-ray room. You can see the radar facility, the power station. That big tank held diesel fuel for the generators. Shot of the transformers in the diesel yard. This building is the bar, the officers' bar and entertainment room. They held dances in here. This was like a small disco. Even has a stage for an orchestra to perform from, or a band or whatever. See, there's the stage. There's two of them, you notice. You can see the trees growing in the window. This was very posh at one time. Oh, there's the damn kids with their graffiti again. Although I do agree with Greenpeace. Now we're inside the actual bar area. You can see this was a very posh bar. This is where the officers had their drinks. There's a second bar for the enlisted personnel. This is out behind the officers' bar. Now Now walking north some more. This is now the enlisted men's bar and recreation area. This also was fairly posh. This used to hustle and bustle with activity. Here's the actual bar area. Now we're going back down the road again. I know we've been down this before, but we forgot to go to the heating building here, where they have big boilers from the 20s. This is the power steam plant. This generated heat for the facility when the generators weren't on. 2 big boilers in here. We believe this is steam. All those pipes also go to this building as well. They can originate steam heat from this building, from these big oil burners. Looked like somebody went wild with power boxes. There's an antique gauge, like from the 20s. Is that a message? There are many of these little white buildings all around the place. They sort of resemble pump houses. We're not sure what they were used for. We're now walking further north. We're now going north of the boys' bunker. We're now just north of the boys' bunker. This is a Boy Scouts campground. We wonder why they had a Boy Scouts campground. They actually invited Boy Scouts in. They built them a latrine. This is not a military latrine, but you'll see this type of latrine on Nassau and Suffolk County Boy Scout camps. We wondered, did they bring the Boy Scouts in here and then abduct them for the Montauk Boys Project? We're only about a quarter of a mile from the Montauk Boys bunker right here. An auxiliary part of the Boy Scouts campground. This is more rugged. We're now leaving Montauk. We're now going out the way we came in. temporarily say goodbye to Montauk. We're walking out the back entrance that we came in. Here again we have another curious thing. Some field knocked the camera out again. If you look, you'll notice there is patterns in the noise. There's Lake Montauk that we all had to go around. Al lost his hat. He doesn't have much up on his head to keep him warm, so he's got to have that hat. We're going back to the cars now. We're now north of the base at the north gate. What's curious here is that this guardhouse has been totally refurbished with a nice brand new watt-hour meter. Nice new power drop line going over to a nice brand new type transformer. Why are they refurbishing the guardhouse on an old derelict base that's now a state park? Interesting. We're now in the Montauk housing area that the town bought, fixed up, and auctioned off to the poor people in the town. This is an alarm area, an old alarm. One day the red light was lit. We believe this is some sort of alarm to the underground. This is one of those many little buildings. We wonder if there's an underground entrance here. This is a ball field owned by the town of Southampton and Montauk State Park people. What we have here, we have Bambi running in the meadow. I get the mayor's attention. We're now going in the east side of the area. This is a town of East Hampton Park. It's not illegal to go in here. You can walk around, we understand, except for where you can't go in the fence that says area closed, no trespassing. This is the power line. This is the Coast Guard transmitter. This antenna can handle a lot more power than they're driving to it. These are the little transmitter sheds. And a very curious pyramid antenna on this pole. There's transmitters in here that put out 10 or 20 watts of power that drive this huge antenna. Note the insulators on the top of this antenna. Now look at the size of the insulators. at the bottom end in the loading box for the RF. See the size of the cable coming out of the ground. Here is this 5 megawatt power line that goes out to the old Montauk Air Force Station. This power line ends up at a state maintenance building. They're putting 5 megawatts at a state building. That is very interesting. Here we'll see the etheric being that appears and then disappears. When we get up closer, you can see a tree that the etheric being was standing in front of. More power line. Here is the old water purification plant. This base had a water purification plant where they removed the bowel and the fecal matter and purified the water and recirculated it back into the system. Now we're coming to the pole with the transformers on it in the maintenance shed. If they put 5 megawatt power into this maintenance shed, they probably burn it down from the heat generated by 5 megawatts of power. There's the big transformers. Each one of those is like 2.5 megawatts each, I'm told, by a loco engineer. This is a relatively small old transformer that supplies that Coast Guard transmitter. Here we see a nice brand new power line put into the old Montauk Air Force Station. This we believe supplies telephone communications for the underground. This line continues and goes over to that maintenance shed again. Look at the thickness of these lines. There must be hundreds of circuits. We're now at the condo where the interview part of the TV special was shot. They're looking at the ocean south of the condo. Myself, Duncan, and Al were interviewed in this room by Tony Hudson. There is Al doing his thing that he's best at doing. Hello, Al. Al doing what he does best. There's Duncan being a clown. This is Duncan doing a trance. All he does here is stare at a light bulb. In a minute, you'll see why he's undressed. When he goes into this trance, he probably would tear his clothing. He goes into the state. He was trained to stare at a light bulb and go into the state by just staring at the light bulb. This transstate has been shortened. This took them about 12 minutes, but we shortened it and cut out the uninteresting parts. Curious, isn't it?
Well, hey, how's entertainment? Well, I don't know, but here I am. Hello, everybody. Fantasyland or something. Right, well.
Now we're going to go into the Montauk State Park. Here is the lighthouse from the parking lot from the Montauk Point State Park. What do we have here? The Montauk Boys. This is inside the concession stand at the Montauk Point State Park and Lighthouse. We're now outside behind the concession stand looking across the Sound and out into the ocean. Once again, the lighthouse. Now you can see land across the water. The first land you see is what's called Fisher's Island. There is Fisher's Island. Now there's a small island. Then you'll see Rhode Island across the Sound. There's Rhode Island, and it runs into Connecticut somewhere as you head west. Here is the Montauk Pussycats. There's a load of cats dumped out of Montauk. very pretty cat. We believe these were dumped off as litters of kittens. You notice a few of them resemble each other. Now we're about 5 miles west of the old Montauk Air Force Station, looking at the radar tower and the antenna that shows up above the hills and the trees. We can see the power line that goes out to Montauk. Now we're in town, heading west into the sunset. This is the actual town of Montauk, village of Montauk. Now we're looking east towards the point again on Montauk Highway. This is a building that stands in the middle of the village of Montauk, like a big monument. This is from days gone by. I wish people wouldn't rock the boat I'm resting the camera on. You can see it's Christmas time, just after the New Year. The tower at Montauk was originally built in 1926 by Carl Fisher as an office building. It was never occupied and such and remained vacant except for the brief period during World War II. The Navy used it as an officer's residence. ATCO Montauk Associates, a division of Hemmerdinger Corporation, completed rebuilding the tower as a residence in 1984. Construction manager, ATCO Construction Company, Architect, Machinist Associates Architects.
Tomorrow night here on this program, David Letterman. Do you believe in UFOs? Many people dismiss the stories of visitors from other worlds, but Whitley Strieber has written convincingly of such encounters since he says he was first visited by these aliens in 1985. His newest book about the visitors is called Breakthrough: The Next Step. Whitley, it's great to see you on television after many wonderful nights on the radio.
Yeah, it was fun.
Before 1985 and this first visit, what was your life like? What were you doing? What were you all about?
It was very pleasant.
Yeah.
Before this happened, I was leading just an ordinary writer's life. You know, I wrote a book about nuclear war back during the Cold War. I wrote a book about environmental problems. I'd written some novels. And then all of a sudden, one night in December of 1985, this very peculiar event took place.
Yeah, you were visited.
I was not visited. I woke up in what appeared to be a nightmare situation in this stuffy little round room with all of these large-eyed sort of faces peering at me, and a machine that kept saying, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" Which I realized when I heard this between screams that I was screaming, which I was so panicked I was even...
Of course, it would be normal to.
Yeah,
Frightened.
and I worked real hard to make this turn back into my bed in my bedroom. It would not do that. So after a while, I blacked out, or was blacked out, and whatever happened. The next morning, when I woke up, I thought, I did not know what had happened to me.
Did you think maybe it had a dream or something like that?
I was not sure. I was very confused. I was very disturbed because I thought I'd seen an owl because of the big eyes, and then I remembered a lot of people in the house. My wife said there had been nobody there. I remembered nothing. And this bothered me a couple days. I went to the doctor because these images of these faces and the whole thing came in. The doctor says, after he listens to this, he says, "You're telling me you're taking aboard a flying saucer by a little green man." And I said, "Oh no, I'm trying to raise a kid. I have a family. I don't want to go."
I write books about nuclear wars.
I don't want to go bonkers on them. I mean, and so went to a psychiatrist, the head of the Department of Psychiatry of New York State, tested, hypnotized, did everything, all kinds of mental tests, physical tests. Nothing wrong with me. Still not. I'm still fine.
Yeah.
I even took lie detector tests to see if I was lying to myself.
Many people have read your book, Communion. I've read your book, Communion, because I interviewed you on radio, and you caught my attention, okay?
Yeah.
How often do these people visit you?
Well, I've had...
And forgive me, and can you make this happen at will? Can you conjure this?
A couple of times it's happened, yeah. I've spent 5 years on Breakthrough because I wanted it to be something that was really, really new, that would be useful to people who are having the experience and reassure them that it's something outside of themselves, which I think it is, and would be at least interesting to people who are saying, "Hey, how long can he string this thing out?" It's going to be a long time because I'm on to something, I'm pretty sure now. But
and it certainly is better for you in terms of your professional career than writing about nuclear war in the Cold Age.
Oh no, it's a nightmare.
Really?
It's a nightmare because of, I mean, we have the social life of dead bugs. My wife and I. We are not. Oh no, nobody. Are you kidding? People are they run in terror. I mean, in social situations.
Oh my God! Here come the Streebers.
Yeah. Oh God!
Don't bring them in the house.
We don't know.
They're going to bring all those bugs in with them.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's tough for my kid. You know, he's a teenager, and teenagers can be difficult about this kind of thing. But getting back to the other thing.
What does that mean? Teenagers can be difficult.
Difficult?
Yeah.
Oh, it means a lot. It means that a young guy has to defend his father.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. UFO. It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he does it. I mean, he's real loyal to me. I have to give him that.
Good for him.
Yeah,
Good for him.
good kid.
And how do these people, these beings, how do they choose who they're going to appear to?
Well,
and by the way, I'm not sure I buy into all this, but I'm not.
I don't blame you.
But I'm not going to knock it because
I would never ask anyone to buy into it. What I'm trying to do, this is for the people who had experiences or think they may have experiences or want to have. It seems there's a little bit of an ethnic bias in the letters we get anyway. A lot of people of Irish extraction, American Indian extraction, a lot of people of color, black people, a certain amount of bias towards the Hudson Valley